Hey folks, Mr. Heiser here, just talking about doing assembly files on Autodesk Inventor Professional. This is what an assembly file looks like when you open it, a standard .iam file. The first thing you're going to want to do is come up here to your ribbon and select the Place tool. And the first piece you place in is always the most important. It should be the piece that's kind of like your base or your main structure to your file. So if I'm putting a pegboard together, I'm going to use my pegboard itself. So there's my board, and it's automatically going to place the first piece in. You see this ghost image that shows up? That's if you wanted to place multiple pieces in of the same part. I'm not, so I'm just going to simply hit escape. And if I try to move this, you notice it can't move around at all, and a pin shows up on my screen. It's because it's what's called grounded or pinned. If I come over to my browser here, you'll see a pin going through my part file. It's because it's grounded in space. It can't be moved at all, which is very important. Because now when I go to place in my other parts, so here's my circle peg and my square peg and my triangle peg. Escape here. You'll notice these can move around if I try to slide them around the screen because they're not grounded or they're not constrained at all. They're allowed to move around the X, Y, and Z axes. So to place these in here now, I'm going to come up to my ribbon and select the Constrain tool. And Constrain is what's going to allow me to place my components into place. Anytime you want to solidify an object or an assembly, you need to put a constraint on each of the X-axis, Y-axis, and Z-axis so it doesn't move. Now if you do want it to move, like for instance we want our pegs to move up and down, we're not going to put a constraint on the Y-axis. So there's different kinds of constraints we have under type here. The first one is called mate, which is basically taking two faces or two edges and gluing them together. Under solution, that's the mate one right there. The other one under solution here is flush, which is taking two faces and basically gluing them side by side so that they're even with each other. Some other ones you need to know: angle, if you wanted to place something constrained at an angle next to each other, and leave some space in between. Tangent deals with taking something that's round and constraining it to a flat surface. And then we have the insert constraint, which insert is like gluing something into a hole. It won't be able to move at all once you insert it in there. So we're not going to use insert. Some people, when they do the pegboard project, they get confused and use the insert tool and wonder why their pegs don't move. Do not do that. We're going to use the mate constraint. And so when you're using the mate constraint and constraining something that's round, you want to make sure that you select the object and not just the end. When I place my mouse on the end, you see the outline of the circle shows up. When I place my mouse on the center of the object, you see a center line show up. So I'm going to select that and come over to my circle hole and make sure again that you see that center line showing up. So I'm going to click, and you hear that little thunk sound pop up. That means you successfully completed a constraint, and don't forget to hit apply. So if I did this right, which I know I did, there is my circle peg moving up and down. Alright, so the circle is the easiest one because a circle, or a cylinder I should say, only has really two constraints if you want it to be fully in place. We're only doing one because we want it to move up and down. Square items or triangular items can be a little more difficult. I'm going to select the side of a face of the square peg and the side of a face of the square hole and hit apply, but you'll notice that this still slides around inside of the hole. That's because I need to put a constraint on another axis, which in this case is the X. So I'm going to select a side now that's adjacent to the side I selected before. Adjacent means next to. And select the side of the hole for the square peg. And there's the thunk sound, and hit apply. you'll notice it moves up and down again. Okay, and the last one, we have the triangle peg. Same deal. I'm going to constrain a side to a side, but you'll notice now when I select an adjacent side, I can't really grab that other side there. Sometimes in assembly constraints, you simply need to rotate the shape and move things around, and that's done through your view cube. So I'm going to rotate the shape and select that side, and now I should have it. So let me return back to my home view, and there it is. So that's how you can do some basic assembly constraints using the mate tool. Now I'm going to place an end piece in here. I'm just going to click this in, and I'm going to turn off the visibility of my work plane so you don't see that, so it's not as confusing. Alright, so another tool we have is what's called flush. Flush is this one right here under the mate type. Under solution, it's flush, and that's when you want two faces or edges to be even with each other. So I want this end piece to be on my pegboard, so I'm going to flush the front face of the end piece to the front face of the pegboard and hit apply. Now you're probably looking at this go, well, you didn't really do anything. It doesn't really look like it's connected. But if I rotate my view cube, you notice I can't move this side to side. It's because these faces that I just constrained are now what's called flush. Alright, so then I would just simply use my mate constraint here to start constraining these edges. And there you have it. That's how I would put my end piece on. So just some things to know about putting constraints onto assembly files.